Welcome back to David refactoring some Java code. Today I want to work on some of the names of the things that I'm not super happy with. And I will first make the names worse. You'll see why and how. And I have only half a plan, so maybe, hopefully, I can later make them better again. Hi, my name is David, and for almost 2 decades now I've been working as a freelance software developer and software architect, and I'm also helping my clients to get better at creating better software as a trainer and as a technically agile coach. If you want to know more about that, you can find me online, or we can schedule a very short video call where we can talk about how I help my clients and how I could possibly help you. Just like in the last 2 videos, I'm working again on some Java software that I wrote. It's a terminal program that displays the current time in the user's time zone and in some other time zones. And it's meant to help scheduling meetings across different time zones. The Java program is not a program that I really want to publish, but I might rewrite this software in Go or in Rust in the future, and this might then be something that can really be published. But the Java program is just for me to get familiar with the problem and to try out some Java features that I didn't have a chance to try before because my clients were on older Java versions. I created a walking skeleton of this application using test-driven development, and I deferred some design decisions to the point where I had this program. So I'm now at the point where I can start to refactor and make the design a little bit better before continuing to implement all the other time zones. And I've explained this in a little bit more detail in the last video, but basically what this program does is some staged processing where every stage enhances the data from the last stage. Like the wall clock just provides the time, then the model controller enhances this time with the user's time zone and more time zones. Then we have a display model controller and a few more stages until you see something on the screen. And in the last video, I created an interface called rendering stage for all the parts that have a green asterisk here. But I've also said I'm not super happy with the names here, so that's what I want to work on today. You can see here that 41 tests are passing currently. One of them is an integration test that checks whether everything is wired up correctly. The others are really unit tests. And now I want to work on the names. For example, look at this class here. It's a terminal display model controller that creates a terminal display model. And those names don't really communicate intent very well, since terminal display model is a very abstract word and very generic, and I don't think that's the correct term here. So today I want to try something that I first saw in Arlo Belshee's naming as a process. I think I first saw it when Emily Page talked about it, but it's originally from Arlo Belshee. Let me bring it over here, which says that naming is a process, and you could start with some complete obvious nonsense like applesauce, and then over quite a few steps make the name better until you get to a real domain abstraction. And since we currently have names that are somewhat honest, so we are here in this stage, in this blue stage, get to honest. Now I want to make the names completely honest, which makes them worse because they become long and verbose, but it might help us to see some important concepts in the code. And I want to start with the model here. So model is a completely generic word, even though it's not the worst word for this. Let's go to complete and honest. And complete and honest would be time and time zone to show time zones, I think. And yes, we can rename those 2 classes that we might rename again in a few seconds. And all those look correct too, but let me go in there and clean them up right after the rename. So those were in model controller test. So we can rename anything with a 1 here to the name without 1 because the 1 here doesn't make sense. It's just a remainder from an automated refactoring. So I want to do this with search and replace. I want to call this a reference because it helps us to reference stuff from the Lambda expression on the outside. And by that, I don't need a mock or a spy to get to the value from the model controller. Replace all and make sure the tests are still passing. And then I can do some more refactoring here to make the code easier to read. Let's make this a var, this too. This parameter here is actually time and time zones to show. And we can also search and replace this. Tests are still green. And you see the lines are getting longer here, but for now that's not a problem. We might clean that up later when we get to better names. I'm just going to change the variables here to var in the other tests, so that all of the tests look mostly the same, and then I'll be back with renaming stuff. Now I've renamed the model time and time zones to show, so the model controller is now also not a correct name, and let's rename this to what it does exactly. It is a rendering stage that creates this time and time zones to show from the current time and some outside configuration like the zone ID. So let's name it just that. Now I've called it for now time and user time zone to time and time zones to show. That's a mouthful, but it's a complete and honest name for this. And yeah, we'll hopefully find a better name in the future. And now IntelliJ did not ask me to rename other stuff too, so I'm gonna have to look through where it is used and do that manually. We have it here where we wire up everything. Yeah, that's this rendering stage. And then here in the test, we should rename the test because it's a test for exactly this rendering stage. So let's call it this, something like this, test. And let's rename all the controller instances here. Again, in this case with search and replace so that I can do it in multiple methods to the long name. And now, since I didn't use automated refactoring, here I should run the tests again. And still all of them are green. Now the next stage creates this model, and it's basically a grid. Right now it's just a single row, but it will be a grid of one row for each time zone and columns for every 15 minutes of this time zone, where every column will be a character and it has a background color, a foreground color, and some content. So how could we name this honestly? I think I'm gonna go with grid of time zones and character render infos. But how would you have called this? Tell me in the comments, and also tell me what you think of those completely honest and very long names. This grid is created here in this controller. It gets the time and time zones to show, and it creates this grid. So let's do the completely honest and very long name of time and time zones to show to this grid thingy. And again, IntelliJ did not ask me to update any variable names or test names. So let's again go through the references and look if we have to, whether we have to update anything. Let's update this variable name. Yes, a long variable name. And let's update this variable name to the long name. Here we can use var again and run the tests. Everything green. This rendering stage that creates this grid then passes the grid on to what is now called a terminal display model renderer, where the class actually is just called terminal display, which again is very generic and probably not completely honest. So let's look at the model that this class creates, which is a screen renderer. And the next stage is what's here called a display screen, where this screen renderer is passed on to. And this is a slightly different case as before, because the screen renderer is not really a model, but it is some object or a lambda expression or whatever that encapsulates multiple render operations that can then be rendered to a terminal screen using Lanterna. So this screen renderer here is a functional interface that some other code can use to encapsulate a couple of render operations in one function and then pass them to the render2 method. So I think this is maybe even an honest and complete name, but render operations is probably not. This is not a completely honest name because it's not the render operations themselves, it's the possible operations on a current frame of the screen. So while a screen renderer here really creates a list of render operations, it uses this class to this interface to execute them. Or in other words, this is maybe something like the graphics 2D from Java Swing, which is an abstraction over the possible graphics operations and not the operations themselves. So let's call this renderable, maybe even renderable frame of terminal screen. Yes, the testing class should be renamed too. Then we can call this a renderable terminal screen row. And here you can see how this renderable frame is used. So this is maybe our current terminal screen frame, and row is okay here, row content is okay here. So an honest name for this terminal display that also sticks to the naming convention I used before for rendering stages would then be, it converts this grid of time zones and character render infos to a screen renderer. Let's check the usages again and whether we should rename something. Yes, probably all of those here in this test and also this variable here. Let's start with this variable. And then we are in this test, so let's change all of those to the long name. Are the tests still green? They are, so we can change all of those to using var to make up for the long name. And the tests are still green. I have one more thing here to change, which is this display screen interface that I didn't really get rid of completely yet, because it still has this with and hate functions here that I didn't change to the tell don't ask principle yet. Maybe something for one of the next videos. So I probably also should rename this, and let's for now rename it to rendering stage consuming screen renderer, which is also a more honest name, and in the future I want to get rid of this interface anyway, so here the long name is probably not even a problem. I want to rename the parameter here, and then let's keep this screen renderer for now, and hopefully we can get rid of the interface later, and then we only have one name for those things. Today I changed a couple of names to make them more honest, which also made them much more verbose and probably worse in some aspect, but maybe also better because now the names are really completely honest. And I think I'm gonna stop it here because the video is already quite long. But also with this change, maybe it's now a little bit clearer to you what this program does and how it does it, because the names are completely honest. But what do you think about those changes? Would you have used different names here that still are completely honest, or would you have tried to get to good names in a single step? Also, if you have any suggestions for good names for those things, then please tell me in the comments. And also tell me your opinions and your feedback in the comments. I always find that very valuable. My name is David, and I'm planning to create videos like this on a regular basis on this channel, and I have another video series on this channel where I talk about more general software development topics while I'm working on bonsai trees. So if you're interested in any of those series, then subscribe to this channel and also enable notifications so that there's a higher chance that YouTube shows you those videos. Also, please hit the like button on this video, it really helps me a lot. I hope to see you next time when I continue refactoring this piece of software. And until then, happy coding!